I gotta get my screen sharing on too here. All right, now I got my layout how I like it. I can see you, be able to see everyone else. How are you tonight?
I'm fine, thank you, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
And week?
What's that?
And how is week?
Oh, it's going good. I got vacation coming up. So tomorrow I go to work one more day and then I get the next week off.
Hmm.
That'll be nice. There we go. I don't want to pull a muscle teaching. All right, looks like Tony just made it. All right, good deal. Just about ready to get going. So I'll wait for him to get settled, make sure his audio, make sure he can hear me. I did remember to record. Welcome, Tony. Your hair looks amazing. I would say Patricia got you beat though.
I've got to find my speaker. I'll be right back.
Okay, I'm the speaker.
You, Tom, I was wondering where was my hair compliment?
That's right. I said you were first place. Looks a little bit nicer. But now he can disagree with me if he wants, but that would be a bad move for him. That's how you put the pressure on without doing anything wrong. All right. I don't want to leave Tony out in the cold. He's like my most loyal student. So I give him a little accommodation here for his technical setup. But I can do a brief recap of the last couple of lectures. So this is actually part 3 of what was originally going to be a 1-part series on fallacies and bias. when I started the topic, I very quickly realized there was way too much ground to cover to do it justice in one. So I'll see how far I get through the biases today. They should go a little faster, but it takes as much time as it takes to do the job right. So I'm not going to put any sort of ticking clock on the correct amount of information that I can later edit down into its most condensed form. So to summarize the last lecture on fallacies, was a two-part on fallacies. I was making a mathematical comparison to measurement specifically. So if you measure a thing and you make a math problem with those measurements, that is how communication works on some level. Something is being observed, something is being referenced, something is being compared, and some sort of insight on that comparison is supposed to map the understanding. That's how communication works at its most fundamental level. So if you take that idea and apply that to the concept of measurement, well, then you can give it a visual element, like imagine it as a drawing or just as a math problem is the way I like to do it because that's where my brain goes. But a fallacy would be a math problem that isn't set up properly, like it has bad syntax. If it were grammar, it would have all of the wrong words, like words that try to do the same thing in the wrong spot. It would be the equivalent of 3 plus signs in a row. It would be the equivalent of dividing by 0. It would be the equivalent of saying a 1 is equal to 1. You know, they're non-statements. They're open, unbounded measurements. So a fallacy is a spot where the equation goes to infinity and you can hide any nonsense in there that
I'll text it to you.
So that's why fallacies actually are used so commonly when people are feeling pressured, is because you don't need to prove anything to use a fallacy. You just have to prove that you're hiding the information where it can't be found, which is disguised as you must be right because I can't see why it's wrong. But good job. You can't find a thing that's hidden inside infinity. You and anyone else, that's not proof that you're right. That's proof that you've made it impossible for you to be proven wrong, which is the same thing as saying you haven't said anything. That's what a fallacy is. It's open-ended. It's a magic wishing lamp for statements. And we went over how some of those magic wishing lamps have moves that are like counters. Like you can use this fallacy, and if you encounter this one and you use this other one that we talked about, they cancel each other out and you actually move the conversation forward. It becomes like a fighting dance. It really does, where you really need to, if you're going to understand the world the way that I'm trying to teach it, you have to break everything down to the 4 fundamental languages. And I've covered these before, but I'm going to start stressing them more lately as languages, because that's the best way to integrate them. Of your body. Your body has these very short circuits that give you your emotional like reactions. You're fighting, you're fleeing, you're feeding, and you're mating. So that doesn't mean that the entire world can only be explained in these terms. That's not the right message. That is saying that your body's chemical threat systems only understand the world in these terms, which means if you are going to effectively communicate with those circuits at all, you need to understand the world in those terms. So that is why these fallacies and biases always seem to come up everywhere, is things are not anchored properly to their actual source. So that paradox needs to be solved somehow. And when you can't come up with a logical explanation, because sometimes that logical explanation is a very vulnerable and, well, not very flattering one to make, well, then it's tough. It's tough to get through that. You either get through it or you don't, and not everybody does. So for everyone who says blah, it shouldn't work or can't work or won't work, you're one of the people it won't work for. That doesn't mean that other people can't do differently with the same tools. It means that I don't have the tools you need to get the job done, but I think they're out there somewhere. I've been collecting tools for a long time, so I can say if you take the time to listen to all the tools I've collected, there's a very good chance at least some of them are in there. But that's just a numbers game at that point. I played the game by trying to have all the tools. So when we come to measurement tools, that's where you get your biggest bang for your buck. And that's why fallacy and bias are such strong tools for understanding consciousness, because consciousness at its core is a thing that compares. And we've covered that in a different lecture. So if you make a measurement and you have an unbounded thing, you cannot fairly compare. So that's why fallacies and consciousness fight each other. That's why people get mad. They're not compatible. Now, a bias is different. A bias is a properly structured mathematical argument, but the figures and variables are weighted abstractly, right? They're weighted unfavorably. They're weighted disproportionately to what is an actual fair measurement. The thumb is on the scale, making it heavier or lighter. The certain information gets pushed aside. Certain information does not exist to you because you have no concept of that information being relevant. That's the big one. That one covers everything you don't know. And I don't mean everything you don't know, because people get really indignant when you say everything you don't know. I'm talking about the stuff you have no fucking idea exists. And when people tell you it exists, not only does it exist, but they can use it and they can use it effectively. Well, they're either liars or they're not. So you're going to have to figure out how to deal with that one on your own. So when it comes,
I think part of the problem with that is that talking about unknown unknowns as anything more than an abstract, the person presenting it must present it as something they know, and it's something you don't know.
Couldn't you
Like,
present
so
that as an exploration? Like, what happens to neither of us knows?
That's why I said more than the concept. That's why I said unless you're talking about it as a concept.
Oh, the concept. I mean the concept of things that exist that you're not aware of.
Exactly. So that is, that's an aggressive statement, You're just talking about it like it's unreasonable for somebody to not think that logical. And I don't think it is, because it requires trust. It requires you to trust the person telling it to you.
Well, let me make a different measurement and see if you agree with this, because to me, I can tell you the core of this measurement is how much of the knowledge of the universe is at my disposal. So if I put everything that could possibly be known in a category, and then I put everything that I know in a category next to that, and I take with me the belief from the limited knowledge that I have that the universe exists as a single concept, which we can understand in tiny slices. So regardless of how much information there is on a given topic, when I compare my ability to look at the slice of the universe, there is too much other universe that is connected in some way to this thing I'm observing that I have no concept of. So my point is that I can always know more because I know relatively how much I don't know compared to how much there is to know in the universe. Everything else to me is just an ego cry. Oh no, Mr.
We
Man,
are,
how can you not live in such a state of uncertainty?
I
Well,
understand why that fits in your logic.
What's that now?
I understand why that fits in your logic.
So now we need to yes and that into whatever you believe, and then you'll have a better picture than you do now. Unless I have nothing of value to offer.
No, my original qualm is still there to an extent, but it wasn't a qualm on the information. It was just a qualm on the perspective it seemed as if it was coming from.
Yeah, no, it was a good detour. I'm glad we took it. Thank you for that energy. So now we're going to talk about bias. So bias is unfair measurements that claim to be correct mathematically and therefore valid. However, lean so heavily into their mathematical structure that they ignore that the variables can change after the answer is revealed to fit whatever answer they wanted to be true. So it's cheating. It's changing the numbers to make it work without doing the steps that actually make it work. So here we go. Anchoring bias. This one here is something where you count it too much. It matters too much. Yes, it's relevant. It is not as relevant as you think it is. It is not relevant to the point that it makes other things less relevant. You see that a lot in politics. Common source bias, tendency to combine or compare research studies from the same source or from sources that use the same methodologies or data. So that is, well, you got 20 people running a scientific study across the world, and it's the same thing to study the same thing, but they're all 20 different studies. And so people say, wow, we got these 20 different studies that all set up to do this one thing, and they don't check that one company spent to fund 20 different studies under 20 different shell companies to create an apparent pool of legitimate looking research that can then be submitted to the FDA from multiple sources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oxytocin, the opioid crisis, COVID-19 vaccine. You know, same game, same market, same product, common source bias. So that's how you create the vacuum to stand on. That's how you make it real, is you spread copies of it and make them look like they're from different sources. You want to be popular online? Forget being original. Forget having good content. Have 20 loyal friends who will share everything that you post. They don't miss a day. They don't miss a post. You win. More than all that other stuff. Common source bias is real. It makes things relevant. So if you care about a thing enough that you think it should be popular, it is not enough that only you care about it. And if you can't care about it enough to show that in the moment, no one else is going to join in with you as well. You have to match the spirit you want and be willing to go farther than it will go with you. And it is going with you. It doesn't lead the way. Conservatism bias, the tendency to insufficiently revise one's belief when presented with new evidence. Nah, it doesn't matter. That's what they say. Nope, that disagrees with me. Nope. Functional fixedness, the tendency limiting a person to using an object only the way it is traditionally used. Yeah, that one. No, man, why? Objects exist to make your life easier. That's the whole reason we build them. That's why we spend money on them. That's why we use irreplaceable time to earn money to buy these goods and services, because we like them. Why you got to use it the way someone else says you got to use it? It's your money. You know, if you want to use a broom as a limbo stick, that's okay. You don't need a Whammy brand limbo set. But someone who's stuck with functional fixedness would say using an object only the way it's traditionally used. Now that's a silly example, but now apply that to the idea that you think is exactly the way it should be. Well, I'm seeing a lot of functional fixedness whenever I run into the conversation of we shouldn't explore that question you've asked. Because to me, the answer, the effort it takes most of the time to answer a question like that exceeds the effort it would take to answer the question, which only makes sense if somebody's running from something or is angry at it, which is the same thing as running from it, just puffing up the chest first. Law of the instrument, an over-reliance on a familiar tool or methods. Yeah. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. That's the way we've always done it. It works, it gets results, which by the way is nothing to throw away without a better plan. But if 0% of your budget is on innovation, 100% of your destiny is death. You can't outpace entropy without innovation, because existing methods need to evolve with a changing landscape, because the world is not constant. It is a slowly changing thing. The things that keep up are the things that survive, which means the things that don't innovate are things that are not keeping up and are relying on an overabundance of reserve strength that is being tapped away by entropy, just invisibly, because the organism is not obviously dying. Everything seems to think all is well. So that's where the innovation budget is never a bad investment. All right. Apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections to unrelated things. So this is a loaded topic, because there is a fine line between genius and nonsense. And the test for this is that you can't tell if it's genius or nonsense until it's finished. You can't dismiss it ahead of time because you don't know what it is. You know what it looks like, but the person telling you that what you think it looks like is only part of the story. So from their perspective and yours, both of you could be telling the truth as you see it. The only truth that might be ignored in that situation is your ability to listen to another version of things and then decide how crazy it is. So take these with a grain of salt, because it's very easy to hide behind these labels and say, oh, you're just doing that thing. I'm obviously smarter than this moron who's wasting my time with these meaningless connections and these stupid diversions, trying to avoid the real issue, being dishonest about his real intentions. They don't fall into that trap. Just listen, observe, measure, decide. So that's a wise order. You don't fail often if you follow those steps. The clustering illusion, the tendency to overestimate the importance of small runs, streaks, or clusters in large samples of random data. So that's like noise in the pattern, right? Like you have this regular thing that happens, and every once in a while you get these weird blips. And rather than focus on the stability of this incredibly large pattern that is almost 100% true all of the time, these little tiny blips become this obsession where they have to be explained and understood. And I know this because those are the things that I become obsessed with. And learning to tell the difference between the nonsense that really is background noise and things where there might be something underneath it as well was a very long process. And well, to understand what is and isn't nonsense, you have to become an expert in nonsense, right? So you have to passionately explore that which is nonsensical. So that's the cost of admission. So anyone who's done that then becomes very adept at weighing the difference between nonsense and nonsensical, or nonsense and not obvious, or nonsense and unique. So wisdom looks like foolishness from every angle that is not wise. And if you have a new kind of wisdom, because nobody's ever thought of it before, or at least not the way you have, it's going to look foolish until you figure out how to explain it in ways that can connect. So that's the clustering illusion, and how I've had some experience with that personally. Illusory correlation, a tendency to inaccurately perceive a relationship between unrelated events. We covered that in the fallacies, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. Pareidolia, tendency to perceive a vague random stimulus, like seeing images of animals or faces in clouds, like the doorknob that looks like a face, that sort of thing. That shadow that looks like a creepy person.
Jesus in the toast.
Jesus in the toast. That creepy person that you see from this weird reflection angle in your bathroom mirror at 2 a.m. for a split second, when you're just trying to take a dump and you don't want to wake up, but you swear to God somebody's watching you out of the corner of your eye for just 1 second, and there's no noise in the house and you can hear a pin drop, but it's gone. That's paradox. It's not real. None of that stuff is real. And if any of you has that happen tonight, I want to hear about it, because I'm just I just want to see how deep that worm went. Duncan, you're muted, buddy, but you got your hand up. I'm ready for you.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, it's as you said, you wanted to hear about it, so it's you asked. Does that count for when I'm sitting there looking at the wall, thinking the spider's getting ready to jump on me, and I look at it and find out it was just a floater?
If you want to give me the credit for that, I would love people to think I have mind powers.
I've done that before too, thinking there's something ready to jump on me from the wall. When I go to look, I find out I was just looking at a floater in my eye. That's what happens when you get old.
Oh yeah, them little floaters are weird.
Yeah, they actually are.
All right, so let's go here. The next one, the availability heuristic, also known as availability bias. It's a mental shortcut that relies on immediate examples that come to a person's given mind when they're evaluating a topic, concept, or method of decision. So it operates on the notion that if something can be recalled and it's available memory, then it's like, I'm trying to think of how to explain this. Maybe I should just skip to the first example. Sometimes the categories they do these are easier to do this way. So the tendency to use human analyses as a basis for reasoning about other less familiar biological phenomena. So like the movie Ants, okay? Woody Allen, they don't go on dates. They don't have awkward meetings. You know, they're not, the grasshoppers aren't coming to, collect taxes and beat them up. That's a human type of bias. But so say that's an example of what the concept is. Now, how you would see that in the world is, oh, I just don't like to step on the grass because I don't want to hurt its feelings. Or maybe something along the lines of, well, that's the best example I'm going to come up with there. I don't need to spend a million hours on this one.
What? Which one?
What's that? That's the best dramatic pause ever. So anthropomorphism is the tendency to characterize animals, objects, and abstract concepts. So that was kind of like that. Like animals, yes, they have some level of intelligence, and in my opinion, if you were to take consciousness and range it from 0 to God, rocks would be 0, bacteria would be greater than 0 but close to 0. Humans would be significantly above bacteria and significantly, infinitely less than God. So that way you cover all of life. So that is what I think consciousness is, because I think it relies on the ability to compare and decide, which is pretty much what every living organism does on some level. Stimuli, comparison, interaction, response, and the complexity of all of those things is determined by the complexity of the organism. So yes, you can make some comparisons, like I see one of my 3 cats has a higher consciousness than the other 2 because it understands certain things that the other 2 don't. It makes certain connections. It understands certain patterns, and the other ones don't. So this cat has an advantage, and it uses it. It knows certain things, and it's smarter. So yes, that's how I can tell it's there, because it's different among species. If it wasn't different among species, then why would there be a range of it from everything? The attentional bias, the tendency of perception to be affected by recurrent thoughts. So, like if you live in Florida, in Orlando, you're going to be thinking about Disneyland a lot, just because it's everywhere. Every sign, every store, every airport, bus station, billboard. And now all of a sudden, news that affects Disneyland, even though it has nothing to do with you or your life in Florida, all of a sudden is more relevant to you than it otherwise would have been. The frequency illusion. Once something has been noticed, every instance of that thing is being noticed. So yeah, like if there was something you were previously blind to and you were made aware of it, all of a sudden you start to see it everywhere. You might think this is a new phenomenon, when really the thing that is new is your perspective range. So that's a bad measurement when you say the thing started happening rather than the thing that measures the thing got better at noticing things. So it's very, on the one hand, it takes a little bit of humility to take that road, but on the other hand, it's a very self-limiting thing to do if you don't. Why wouldn't you take that advantage if it's there, if the price is just admitting that you didn't know it before? Implicit association, where the speed with which people can match words depends on how closely they're associated. I like implicit association because it's a good way to subtly change topics or to change the focus of topic without necessarily changing the entire conversation. So if I had to make an analogy for this with a social algorithm that I use to hijack implicit association, it would be the movie Tokyo Drift. All right. So the rules are simple. Well, let me talk about what, so the association is, yeah, if you say something that's close enough to the words, it's just close enough and somehow it's related. It shares enough similar words that it must be the same thing. That's the bias. So if somebody is talking just total nonsense and you're trying to help them get back on track and you're not getting a lot of cooperation from that person, one of the things that you can do is number one, recognize why you wouldn't be getting a lot of cooperation from that person. And I'm going to hit this well a bunch of times because it's the IT version of mental diagnostics. It's the have you tried turning it off again, turning it on again mental diagnostic. It is the test for duality. And so if somebody is attacking you because they don't understand the concept of duality and the concept of something that is not the thing they believe is threatening, even when encountered in the wild, like it's a challenge, they need to go, like it was always there, but now it needs to be reacted to because their turn to see it was, and now it's not okay. So something must happen. Again, it's measuring the world by the self instead of the self by the world kind of thinking. But so say you're in that situation and you're trying to get out, but you may be also trying to advance the conversation as well. Like it's important to you to connect. Right? That needs to be the goal too, because at any given time, you can just throw your hands up and walk away and say, I'm sorry you feel that way. We're gonna part ways then. We're not gonna talk anymore. It's okay. Goodbye. Done. That's as far as it ever needs to go. But say you have a vested interest in maybe doing a little better. I like to test my communication skills this way. I want to see, no one's going to blame me for not getting through to that person because nobody gets along with that person. But maybe it's because somebody hasn't tried everything. Maybe there's some crazy little thing that I haven't learned yet that would be the right thing to get through to that person and maybe get their full potential on display instead of how strongly they can show that their mind isn't able to change in any way. So when it gets to the implicit association, if you want to practice that exercise, the exercise is you can only use words that person uses to talk to them. You can change the order, you can add words, but there has to be a common link. And the bigger that link is, the greater percentage of the words you can reuse in whatever order. So if they use 10 words and you can pick 4 of them and you can spread those 4 words out of in any order in the sentence you give back, if you can do that in real time, you will get 40% of their agreement without having to do anything. Because people trapped in duality are usually fueled by validation of others, which is tied to the agreement from others. And by using the words they give you, you create a validation relationship where to deny you is to deny what they have given you when that is the only thing you give them back. So if somebody is being a giant asshole and you are kind to them and you only speak to them with words they have spoken to you, they will have a very difficult time being an asshole to you for very long because you're literally speaking only their language exclusively and you're doing it better than they are. And they won't be able to tell you it's wrong without arguing against themselves. That is how implicit association becomes a mental diagnostic. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of mental agility. And it also takes a complete suppression of the reaction mechanism inside you. You no longer get to decide if what they said is good or bad or relevant or important. You only have time to think about how many of those words can I immediately rephrase to slightly shift the conversation in a positive direction. You can do one or the other. You can be right, or you can be in the right direction. That's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Whenever you measure a thing, you cannot do both of those things at the same time. You have to prioritize. See, Duncan's nodding his head. So a lot of people get screwed up because they try to affect direction and speed, or direction and precision at the same time. You got to pick. So when you're using implicit association, that is we're going to move this thing along because this is a transitional step anyways. And it doesn't matter how badly you've got it because you're already off course and the goal is to get you back on track, not to tell you how lost you are. So one's much more useful than the other. So now we're going to go to salience bias, tendency to focus on items that are more prominently or emotionally striking, ignore those that are unremarkable. Yeah, you give, I don't know, let's say there's a problem that affects 1% of a group, and 50% of state resources are spent on that. That's a salience bias. They're saying 50% of the resources belong to 1% of this issue. And the emotional arguments behind that often can be just as loud as the boring ones, like we need better pipes. There's too many examples of that to really get specific, but it's all over the place. It's more or less my thing is more important than your thing type of argument, and here's why. Nobody runs out of those. Selection bias. So that's when the members of a sample aren't chosen at random. You cherry pick your participants. You only talk with people who agree with you. That's a selection bias. You only have certain conversations. That's a selection bias. You'll only think about certain ideas. That's a selection bias. You only hang out with certain colored folks. That's a selection bias. Not a good one. Survivorship bias. When it's concerning on the people or things that have survived some process and overlooking those that did not because of their lack of visibility. So that's we're going to focus on the good, even if it was 100 bad things to one good thing. We're still going to focus on the good and pretend the bad things didn't happen. That's the survivorship bias. The well-traveled road effect. Yes, to underestimate the duration to travel off-traveled routes and overestimate the duration taken to travel less familiar routes. So just because it's familiar, it becomes underestimated, and sometimes just because it's new, it becomes overly analyzed. That's the well-traveled road effect. Like your perspective changes with experience. And that is a thing that we do that needs to be examined closely because it's limiting. It's as limiting as it is useful. Experience is the well-traveled road effect. You can learn the fast roads to things. However, what you lose with repeated exposure is novelty. And with novelty comes low-level anxiety. That's curiosity. You don't have curiosity or excitement without some level of anxiety. The reason it feels good is because it's the right amount of anxiety to trigger your focusing systems, your adrenaline, your dopamine, and the promise of serotonin if you get something right. So it's this low-level survival engagement. And when that is done when that is done at the beginning of a thing, it heightens your ability to learn and absorb new information. Because your perspective is as close to zero and unbiased as it can be when you start a new thing. You treat everything like you don't know it until you convince yourself that you know it well enough, and then you stop learning at all. So the mental hack for that is to train your brain to make the first thing you do in any situation be to act like, what would it look like if I've never done this at all? And run that mental simulation at the speed of light like you could do everything else. Once you learn how to do it and visualize it, that is how you correct that bias and give yourself an instant boost in creativity, because that's a thing you can turn off and on from as many different perspectives as you want. Autistic people have an advantage because that is the state of mind that they can't control. So not only do they have the ability to change perspective, where it's much easier for someone who's not that anxious all the time to have a fixed perspective, they can't control it. So they have to learn to understand the world that way, which from a survival state, if you can make it past the incredibly long incubation period, once those patterns are understood, their usefulness is unmatched. So that is why having the ability to use your own anxiety on purpose is vital if your goal is to increase your brain's capacity to absorb information. Because anxiety is the tool that sharpens. And it isn't that the anxiety goes away, it's that the personal tolerance to it grows with voluntary repeated exposure, like going to the gym. And you can tell how strong somebody is mentally by how much fear they can bench press without breaking a sweat. And that's a different way of saying their tolerance to the unknown, the unfamiliar. How willing are they to just jump into a bunch of words to explore an idea with no concept of how it will turn out or where it might go?
I've got a question,
Yes, sir.
and I want to jump back to the page. Let's talk devices, cognitive dissonance, survivorship, well-traveled. So we're discussing the well-traveled road effect right now, right?
Yes. We were just
Okay.
finishing that one up. Yes.
I just want to say, and Duncan can help me with this, and I'm so glad he's here because I believe, oh, come on, there we go. I believe that you took it from the definition, and in your application, it became more of Tom's bias than the actual bias, because and I chimed in after you said the F word, fear. Like I was thinking it, and then you said fear, and I was like, oh, there it is.
So what I was doing there
go
is they gave it the well-traveled road effect, and I explained that, but I had to balance it because the bias was biased because it left out the road not traveled. But most people do because that's the dark, scary road. You like the one
Okay.
on it. But yes, you're correct. That was my personal spin on it. Specifically, what I felt was left out of that topic in general. I always think when you talk of any topic, it's good to map the plus and the negative side of it, because if you don't, well, you've got the fallacy there. You can hide anything in that. Now we are on cognitive dissonance. This was the first thing I ever learned about how to understand emotions. This was the first thing I learned that makes sense. Let me explain, let me rephrase it. This was the first thing I learned that made sense. Cognitive physics is Newtonian physics, Newtonian particle physics. If a person's mind is as a particle, a ball instead of a wave, and it has velocity, mass, and direction, and inertia, and all of those properties, and another person has a different idea, different direction, different velocity, different sized ego, different energy, every possible permutation of how those objects can interact in a physics textbook. The billiard balls, the motion diagrams, the little seesaws and the table things, and the spaceships going in 10 directions and at half the speed of light, and how fast does everybody age. Well, that's not Newtonian. That's relativistic. But when it comes to like the local stuff, the Earth level stuff, the non-speed of light stuff, cognitive dissonance is particle physics. And I'll explain how I learned that was true by practice, because I guessed it was true. I didn't know. I was trying a thing. It was attempt number, I don't know, 940,000, because this is just what I do all day. I just run simulations about how to connect. My brain has been stuck on that setting since I was little. And I was playing the piano one day, and out of nowhere, it just came to me. It was like cognitive dissonance is like particle physics. And I'm like, who said that? And I was like, I did. Like the thought hit me, and I was like, well, how do I even test it? Well, I started watching, and sure enough, people who argue with each other, who don't change direction, the force is conserved. It's equal and opposite. It's a literal transfer. And you see things that can make a person change direction. There's spin, there's angles, there's trick shots. Like if you just exist as a reactionary creature, you are a ball with no free will. You have a path, you have a track, and you can't leave it because you don't know the track isn't there. You can't escape it because you're not aware of what's happening. But if you have a different ball who can somehow see like at the top of a hill, and it can decide when it jumps in with the other balls, it can look and see which one is going in which direction. And if it spends enough time watching that, maybe it can say, if I land here in this direction, from this angle, it'll hit this ball and it'll make them go way over there. Why? Because they don't know they've changed direction, because they're reacting without understanding. Cognitive dissonance is reaction without understanding at its core. It's literally the human stop button. It's the I don't know what's going on button. So because it's predictable, that makes it usable to those who understand how it works. And that's just a perception thing. So when I say cognitive dissonance and the normalcy bias, well, let's go into these. I'll give examples. The refusal to plan for or react to a disaster that's never happened before. Let's say that you think people need bottled food and water for 3 days because you believe that, well, there's a meteor coming, and you know it's going to hit the town and it's going to blow up the water supply, and you're damn sure of it, but nobody else believes you. And you know that if you press the meteor angle, you're just going to be labeled a kook because nobody wants to prepare for a meteor. So all of a sudden, maybe you talk about a geological survey that says there's an earthquake coming and we should get some bottled food and water, and you give them your meteor plan. And they do it because they're worried about earthquakes, because they can imagine what an earthquake would be like when they can't imagine what a meteor strike would be like. That's one example. Why should we ever have to plan for that? It's never happened before. Okay, well, how do you know? Maybe the last people who didn't plan for it didn't survive. They didn't tell you they didn't plan for it. What are you waiting for someone to give you a book? A book of all the bad things that could happen? That book is written by the smartest people we have around. And if you think that book can't get any bigger, you are not the smartest person around by definition, because the smart people are the ones who make the book bigger. Effort justification. Yeah, we all fall into that one. If you try hard for it, you're going to value it more. That's why if you want somebody to believe something is true, you hide it behind a secret anything. People do not like the truth when it is out in the open. But if you make them turn one rock to find it, they will cling to it harder than anything else you've ever seen. I'm going to tell you something right now. This whole Oscars thing, it means buy Pfizer stock as soon as it dips. That's what this Will Smith Oscars thing means. It's 3 layers of deception. And I know this because both sides of this story were on every search page I looked for 5 pages deep, which meant both sides of this story are meant to be out in public view. First side of the story, Will Smith got mad about the alopecia comment, slapped Chris Rock. So now we need to talk about alopecia. Second story, Will Smith and Chris Rock staged the event because Pfizer was a sponsor of the Oscars. And this was to raise awareness for the alopecia drug. So it's a hoax. So what happens? Both cases, we talk about the alopecia drug. Both times, there's enough conspiracy nut theory to dismiss the Pfizer stuff because everybody who threw their lot in with the vaccines is still too embarrassed to admit that Pfizer is a terrible company when it comes to safety. And that people were hurt because people wanted a shot more than they wanted science. So they're going to forget all that. So that's why it will work. So forget right or wrong, because that doesn't matter. This is about what to do with your money and predicting the events. Both sides of those stories are out, and the expectation is people will fight over them. The only topic that will survive is the word alopecia, because everything else cancels out, because it's been turned into a Democrat Republican love fest. However, when Pfizer does release their alopecia drug, their stock will go up. However, their stock will go down in response to the controversy, but the reason it needs to go down is because of recent inflation. Rich people need sure bets to get their money back. So Pfizer, just as an example of how this could work, has some dirt on Will Smith. I can't say what that would or couldn't be, but hypothetically, some have said it's flight logs from Epstein's jet. But who knows? It could be anything else. It could be a bad voicemail. It could be a picture, an unflattering video his wife took. The point is not if it did or didn't. It's not outside the realm of possibility that somebody who is famous could be persuaded to do what a very rich pharmaceutical company who is sponsoring the Oscars, which he is about to receive that evening, by the way, if they ask for a little favor. So all of that happens.
And him and his wife boycotted 2 years ago.
Yep. Cheap Pfizer stock. People with money who are in the know of, hey, here's what's going on. Put their money in it. They take they have the junk stock now because nobody wanted it, so nobody's looking. All of a sudden, the alopecia drug comes out, Pfizer stock sales, shareholders forget, hey, we're making money, bing, bang, boom. This one's not like the other one. We're actually going to be safe, blah, blah, blah. And all of that has nothing to do with the alopecia drug. 100% of that has to do with providing a stable vehicle for people with inside knowledge to make their money worth more, because what they have done with the money currently has made it worth less for everyone else. Inflation. So while everybody else is on their damn high horse talking about the Democrat side of the Will Smith Chris Rock thing and the Republican side of the Will Smith Chris Rock thing and the conspiracy theory Will Smith Chris Rock thing, all of those people are dancing to the tune of, we're just going to cash in while everybody else does this thing we know they will do because we understand how their reactions make them behave. And we're the only ones who took the time to become self-aware of this and monetize it. That's how it works. That's how the two-party system works as well. All right. And it uses all of these biases. Effort justification. It makes you work for it. If you woke up in the morning and got everything you wanted, it'd be boring after a while. But you have to wait 4 years. And how many people on the internet do you have to fight just for a chance to get your person in office? Well, you're going to really care about it then. Especially if you think some of your votes didn't get counted. Whoa, boy, you'll really be steamed then. Oh, who knows what you'll do? The people who made you upset know exactly what you'll do. That's the answer. You might not know what you're going to do. They do. But to be fair, they're the ones dropping the marbles. The Ben Franklin effect. A person who has performed a favor for someone is more likely to do another favor for that person than they would be if they had received a favor for that person. So the theory behind that is people like to feel useful. They don't like to feel in debt. So if you ask somebody for a simple favor, like, hey, can I borrow your screwdriver? And you give it back and that favor goes well, they're more likely to do a favor for you in the future because they got to be the good guy as opposed to them doing the favor as well. That give or take. That one's, it's real for some. It is real for some. Confirmation bias. This one is funny because it's ironically edited. The backfire effect, a tendency to react to disconfirming evidence by strengthening one's previous belief. These are fan written. They wrote, the existence of this bias as a widespread phenomenon has been disputed in empirical studies. Either the person who wrote that has a terrific sense of irony or a surprising lack of self-awareness. Because the argument is made that disconforming evidence strengthens the opposite belief, and they follow that statement up with something that strengthens the belief that it's not true. So it's either brilliant or I don't know what the word is. The opposite of brilliant. Congruence bias, the tendency to test hypotheses exclusively through direct testing instead of testing possible alternative hypotheses. Yeah. That's not knowing when to cut your losses. Your experiment is bad and you should feel bad. You tried it, it didn't work. If too much of reality needs to change to make your idea work, your idea was never compatible with reality. Experimenters or expectation bias. Yeah, you were expecting a certain thing, so you favor the data to look for that thing. Or a certain thing is bad, so you favor the data to not look at that. Or you just outright fabricate things by what you omit. Yeah. Excuse me. Observer expectancy effect. When a researcher expects a given result and therefore unconsciously manipulates an experiment or misinterprets the data in order to find it. So let's say that someone's giving a survey. Do you prefer red or blue? But the person is wearing a red shirt. Well, that's observer expectancy effect. Selective perception, a tendency for expectations to affect perception. That is the single most seductive and destructive and self-limiting bias there is, because it is not a single thing. It is a list of thousands of things that every person has. Thousands of different things that you don't know exist, that you interact with on a daily basis. Sensations of your body, information from your senses, ideas, ways of measuring the world, ways of measuring people, ways of measuring concepts that have never been explored. Each one of them limits in a way that is not replaceable, except by imagination. You can feel that it should be there if you explore around it enough. That's the best you can do. The Samwise, something like that, reflex. The tendency to reject new evidence that contradicts a paradigm. Oh, yep, that's different. Haven't heard that before. That's not the way it is. Egocentric bias, tendency to rely too heavily on one's own perspective, have a high opinion on self than reality. Yeah. The bias blind spot, the tendency to see oneself as less biased than other people or to be able to identify more cognitive bias in others than in oneself. There is only one way to get around this, and it's what I opened with. To assume that you are trapped inside of it all the time and that you could always be doing better. That is the only defense, and it is an incomplete defense. It becomes a bear in the woods scenario where everybody has cognitive and bias blind spots. Can you have less of them than the person that you're next to? My answer to that is you need to train them daily. And the number of people who do exactly what you do with the level of dedication that you do will be the people who become your peers at this. and everyone else who does not will be left behind. But that's everything: basketball, writing, kickboxing, you name it. What you apply yourself to is what's going to grow. Tony.
Today, I on the road was listening to Simon Sinek,
Okay.
and it was a long speech, but the important part was value and trust. Humans are social beings. We judge our success as creatures by our like-mindedness, and when you are around like-minded people who have the same values, then something special happens. That's how culture develops and trust develops and love develops, is that you have the same values. People support businesses with good values and people with good values that they agree with and see themselves in. So I feel like that's similar.
I would say that values are a good thing when they are not used to substitute trust. Because values are often used to test trust. And then the values become an excuse to withhold it.
So,
yeah.
That's a pessimistic outlook.
I'm sorry, has your race never been questioned based on your opinion?
Does that mean it's more common than the positive alternatives?
I'm saying,
I think
it's equally relevant in a different direction.
The perspective isn't a false one, but it's an unnecessarily pessimistic one.
Unnecessary compared to what?
The topic at hand. Like, we can stay balanced. That seems unbalanced.
How is adding to the opposite side of something unbalanced?
Because of the length it went to, maybe? I didn't say it wasn't true.
I did not.
I didn't say it wasn't true. I'm not denying it.
No, I'm curious. I'm trying to understand the path. Because to me, it felt like the same amount of length, but you seemed it was a harder journey and a longer and less necessary one, by comparison. The subjective experience is measured differently. So I'm trying to figure out why. It's a good question.
Let's start over. I mean, we can just take it from the top then. I didn't think you were going to take it there, but I'm down to.
No, I'm curious. That's where it goes, because I learned stuff too. I didn't know just do this for you. I do it for me too. So if there's something there for me, I'm going to stop. You guys can wait.
All right. So, okay. So the reason why that's different, and the fact that you want to give it more attention, makes you want to go back to what I read today or what I listened to today. You talked about values.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the term we're going to go on, you know how I kind of use energy? I feel like values in this conversation should be more clearly defined. Because even when I was saying it, I said it, a few different ways. And values is the one that you latched onto. So let's define values better to use it how we see it. Now, my setting was, that's how we build. Oh, that's why. Because I said that's how we build trust, and that's how we build trust. That's how we build love. That's how we build community.
Trust in
your first sentence illustrated your point, and I fully agreed with it, which was that it's a great thing if it comes first, or it's a great thing if it isn't used wrong, and that was fine. And then the next sentence after that was the one I was like, wait a second, hold up.
So
why did that
word
need
that
to
word
go
that caused
there?
the divergence was actually from the previous sentence. Used to build love and trust. Love and trust are not these static positive qualities. They're equally rife with potential for self-deception and destabilization. So if the target of love and trust is not defined, it's assumptive that the best case scenario is love and trust with other people. However, the motivation to have love and trust for other people could be one of an avoidance, meaning I need to have love and trust in other people because I am dependent on them. And therefore, it's not the same dynamic as someone who wants to be a part of a thing. Their love is motivated differently. One, they can reach it and they're motivated with a negative self-serving spin, which, yes, it mimics many of the effects of love and trust and is better than nothing. but is a very different product mentally than someone whose goal is
The difference
helping
is when
others.
I see
So
that,
it's
I
the
don't
goal,
see shared
right?
values.
What's
I don't
that?
see shared value. I don't see shared values in that. And I
So
think that's the
thing
difference.
is, shared values is not a big enough bucket because you can have shared values that make one thing true, but too many other things that are also true at the same time, which can make it into anything else. It's not the right number of measurements. You need at least two more to be saying anything that isn't infinite.
Was it not a good enough measurement to say the advancement of civilization and the building of societies and cultures, and that
We
our
could
human
say-
survival and success was
We
dependent
could
on
say
it?
we could advance civilization right into the ground by getting rid of all the people and bring nature back to its original state, turn the planet back into a blah, blah, blah. There's a few people who'd be on board for that. Or we could say the advancement means making sure everybody
Yeah, and they
has
would trust
food
each
and-
other to see that
Or we
through.
could say that it means the engineering of a master race that's genetically bred to eliminate all disease and to make everybody bigger, stronger, faster.
And everybody that believes that would trust it to be true because they have the same values.
Yeah, so that's where it kind of, the assumption that the group is as homogenous as what it is on paper is where that falls for me.
But
Yes, the
isn't
party
it still
line
this?
is we identify as this, but it's the reasoning behind it is not necessarily unified.
Isn't it though? Like I'm not saying the disunification. Like if you want to build the master race and if you want to build the master race and I want to help you, we
Are
can
you
be
saying
best
that if I
buddies.
want to do this? I was using that as an example. I don't want that. I
Yeah,
want
but
everyone
if
to
you
leave me
did.
alone. That's what I want.
With our shared values, working towards putting energy. Okay, so let's take it to me. Since we're investing this way,
Okay.
energy. I have found that valuing people yields the best result.
So now we have a different kind of measurement. When you are valuing people,
I was gonna give a couple, but go ahead.
but no, I'm saying that that's one. So I'm recognizing that as one of the rules you've given me. When we are referencing valuing people, this is what you've learned. Because where your measurement is pointing. Okay, I'm with you.
Valuing people yields the best results as far as a topic that we can share values across the board on, because at the very least, we're probably both going to identify as people and have other people that we have already identified with as well.
Okay, so I'm gonna break that down into its statements so that I can take it at my speed. So you said it gets the best result when, and what was that first?
Well, no, because, not when, because.
Okay, it gets the best result
It
because.
gets the best result because at the very least, we are usually both able to identify as people. So
Okay,
if I'm valuing
So
people,
hang on, we gotta stop there because that's as far as I can go before I have questions that change where we're going. There are
okay,
way too many. Anytime you add a but, anytime you add an and, anytime you add a therefore before acknowledgement has been made, you might be sending into the void.
you know what this is like? This is like that time in the dojo when you said something and I said, that's hilarious. And you were like, why? And I said, because it's so specific, but it's true.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah, that's where I get stuck is the specificity. Because I see useful things that could be expanded on at every step of the way. So when you said it's the best thing for
You said something
people,
important.
what's that? I see things
The
that can be
words I
expanded as we go.
use are the most general because the vibe that you are able to get from them and bounce back, I can 99.99% of the time fit into. So every question you have, I'll likely be able to say yes to if I want to, or no to if I want to. But I will
Right,
try
yeah,
to answer them.
You'll never have to deal with being wrong.
Okay, like think about how I melt. Think about that expression as a melt. So
Oh
ask
yeah,
your
no, I'm
questions on that.
intimately familiar with that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's
For
go.
me, that was a topic I explored by discuss sensitivity to vulnerability. You'd have some sort of mirror inversion of that if my theories of consciousness are correct, and we've reached the same things by different paths of opposite polarity.
I'm gonna put this in the chat because I think I've mentioned it before, and you said what you said a few times before, but this conversation needs to keep going. So I'll put it in the chat. You go.
So the thing that I said is that I was getting to was the best result when, or because, the best result because. So the question that I have is not, is it the best result? It is, when is it the best result? When is it the worst result? And how do you tell the difference between where you are on that spectrum? Because situations can change around that fact, which change the relevant measurement, which you would be able to recognize in real time at the situation.
Okay, here's the thing.
So I'm
I
just saying
feel
that
like
how do
the
we know
worst.
that?
I feel like those measurements might not apply.
Well, of course
because-
you would. You haven't explored them before. I think they
Well,
matter. So.
I have explored them before.
Okay, so what's the
I have
answer? It's so
explored
much
them
faster
before.
to just give me the answer than it is to explain the relevance. Stop wasting our time. Give it up, man. It's not prom night. It's prom night. I rented a limo. I put on the tux. It's time to put out.
Yeah, but I'm a professional. Remember?
Already bought you dinner.
Okay. Why those measurements don't apply? Because
So why is it only
valuing
good?
people can lead to, because those measurements are subjective. The statement is subjective. Like I said, my vibe can fit in 99.9% of the time. So
Right.
the best and the worst
So
that
does
can
mean it's
happen
not
by
saying
valuing
anything
people are
except
the best.
1% of the time?
Hmm?
Does that mean if your vibe can apply to 99% of all things, does that mean it's only saying 1% of a thing that's specific?
Not
an
until
example
not
of,
until
by the
you
way,
place it there.
where is
Not
it?
until you place it there.
Right. So that was my test for the implicit association bias. Remember, we covered that as an example. I used it in real time. I gave Tony back 99% of his words and asked him a question that focused on 1% of it because I felt it was a valid point of measurement to observe based on the information that we had shared, which is if it's 99% applicable, it's only 1% useful in a specific situation because it's the same, because it's everything. It's the magic gel, which is useful when you need the magic gel, but the magic gel is not a measuring tool. It fills the space that it's in, right? It's a liquid, it has no shape. It's not
It
good.
fills,
You can measure
but
volume.
the last thing I said was until you put something in there.
So I'm
Like
interacting.
rewatch the tape.
No,
The
no, no.
last
So
thing
the
I said
question
was,
that I'm interacting with,
yeah.
yes, I get the
so
thing.
I was
Question
about
I'm
to
interacting with.
respond. Yes, I was going to respond and say that those measurements apply to whatever you value, because I value people. And so the best and worst for me, if I was going to put something in there, if that's what you're asking, would be things probably involving people.
Oh wait, are we exploring your opinion? I thought we were exploring your opinion.
I thought we were exploring the concept.
I thought I was too, but you were telling me only half of it was relevant. And so I thought
Not
you had
half.
special knowledge of that.
Not half.
So
I never
we'll
said it
come
was
back to
wrong or
that
that it
one
wasn't true.
We'll come back to that one because that one's
Rewatch the tape. I never said it was wrong or untrue.
well, I've learned everything I can for it. I have an eidetic memory for ideas. So everything we've explored, if it hasn't clicked something already, it's not going to. So I'll wait for it to reform itself in a different way, and then I'll understand it.
Are you good at reading micro expressions?
What's that?
Are you good at reading micro expressions?
When I want to be. I'm also good at ignoring them to get the opposite effect for people who wish they would be validated. The false consensus effect, the tendency for people to overestimate the degree to which others agree with them. Okay. Yeah, if you have a big brain and you understand 100 things that tie to one word, and you say that word and someone else says, yeah, you just agreed, that person agreed to 100 things when they might just have said, yeah. Yeah, look out for that one. The Fourier effect or the Burnham effect, the tendency for individuals to give high accuracy ratings to descriptions of their personality that are supposedly tailored specifically for them, but are in fact vague and general enough to apply to a wide range of people. Yes, I am a deeply unique individual with a slightly troubled past and some demons to overcome. I have a hard time getting up in the day sometimes, but somehow I manage to get through. I just keep trying to do the right thing, and I know that my inner character and strength of will get me done. I'm a hardworking, honest Christian man, and it's on and on. Like you're recycling adjectives, and that's fine because you're a recycled creature. That's the point. Is you are a person, okay? There's a brain, there's a spinal cord, there's a soul, or whatever's in there. You're not the only one with it. And it presents in a unique way through you, but so many of the things that you experience are not unique, that the desire to carry that uniqueness and protect it limits the potential, because things that are unique are specific. They're not general. So the more general you become in terms of what you can understand, the less special you become. Except you could choose to measure yourself, instead of what you have that nobody else does. You can measure yourself by how much you have compared to everyone else does, if your goal is a mental picture. So one is, I need to be special because if I don't change, nothing can be me. And that's true. Nobody's lived your life. Nothing can be you. So you are guaranteed to be special and unique if you don't do anything. And you'll also be as special and unique as everyone else who doesn't do anything. That's the Burnham effect. The illusion of asymmetric insight, where people perceive their knowledge of their peers to surpass their peers' knowledge of them. Yeah, that's a crapshoot. If you've got Sigmund Freud and I don't know, Forrest Gump in the same room, Sigmund Freud's going to understand Forrest Gump a lot better than Forrest Gump's going to understand Sigmund Freud, and every possible permutation in between. So that one says whatever you want it to. Illusion of control, the tendency to overestimate one's degree of influence over other external events. I can tell you that is a very useful one. People will do anything you say if they're in control. Listen to that. People will do anything you say if they're in control. Which one of these guys are we going to vote for? Oh, it's your vote. Most important vote of your life too, right? I can say that you can play this tape anytime you want, and it will always be historically relevant, because somehow the danger level of what is the most historic election in our life is always the one that we're about to have. The illusion of transparency, tendency for people to overestimate the degree to which their personal mental state is known by others, to overestimate how well they understand other people's mental states. That's a crapshoot too. You got some people who can read body language like a book, and you've got some people who are oblivious to even the most obvious social tells. And it's the same thing as the free will conversation. It's not an either or, it's a yes and how much is the difference? Who can see more than the other? It's why college ball is interesting. It's not that they're the best ball players. They're not. Pro ballers are the best ball players, but they're similar enough that it's competitive. So you don't tell the difference by giving someone an absolute position on the spectrum. You tell the difference by having them compete with one another. And it becomes very quickly if Michael Jordan is beating up a baby, or if it's two dudes of equal skill going at it on a fair contest. With either one of them having a chance to go. So I've got about 11 minutes left, so I'm gonna keep going here. Illusion of validity, the tendency to overestimate the accuracy of one's judgments, especially when available information is consistent or intercorrelated. Yeah, That's if you think here's the rule about arrogance. That's kind of what that ties to. The illusion of superiority ties to that as well. I'm going to combine these two biases. You can be arrogant to the degree that you are always right. And that's a spectrum. How far can you see into the future? How much further can you see what is important than the person next to you? Because if you push and you're right, people will give you respect. If you push and you are wrong, people will give you disgust, and you deserve either. Because knowing the difference of when to push and when to ask is the mark of a good leader. And anyone who does it wrong gets disgust as a result. Because those are the things that trigger us. We don't like to see when we push when we should ask. We don't like to see when we shouldn't push at all. Illusion, naive cynicism. Yeah, expecting more egocentric bias in others than oneself. Oh, you're obviously biased because you're an insecure piece of crap. But I'm not. I know you are, but what am I? Obviously. I'm rubber, you're glue, remember? It's obvious. I've spent years studying this. Obviously, rubber. The naive realism, the belief that we receive reality as what it is, objectively and without bias. People will agree with us, and those who don't are uninformed, lazy, irrational, or biased. Yes, the blanket statement that anyone who doesn't disagree with me is biased. Yeah. Overconfidence effect, tendency to have excessive confidence in one's own answers to questions. For example, for certain types of questions, the answers that people rate as 99% certain turn out to be wrong 40% of the time. Yeah. Oh yeah, it works 100% of the time, 50% of the time. Pass or fail. The planning fallacy, the tendency for people to underestimate the time it will take them to complete a given task. Yeah, bad time management. Oh, that'll only take a minute. Especially if you're not the one doing it, right? That gets multiplied by how little involvement you have with the thing that you're suggesting. Which is why I have a very hard time doing anything that anyone asks me if they're not willing to be a participant in it as well. Because I believe that participation of a want from beginning to end is a vital part of the success process. And anyone who wants a want without participation is trying to take advantage of something. Or there's a devaluation of their life to yours by comparison alone, at least by function. That might not be the intention, but that's what happens. Tony.
That's the same as an even energy exchange, right? Or at least some energy exchange, because you didn't list any type of currencies. You just said involvement.
Yeah, it's the measurement is how much the person values their own goal. That's the measurement. So if a person gives me a goal that they have and they want me to invest time, energy, resources, etc., I know the cost of that and I have to agree to be a part of it. And if I do, then the exchange takes place. However, to avoid a situation where somebody is expecting an honest effort from me, but would not be willing to put forth that same honest effort themselves, even to their own task, let alone one of mine, that is a very easy thing to measure. You ask for 5% of what you are asked to do immediately up front. It's like a down payment for a loan. People have integrity credit scores, and integrity for people with low credit scores are not willing to put anything down. They will walk away from the deal. They won't sign. Here's a great example of how to use that in corporate world. Hey, can you do this thing that normally is my responsibility, but it would really help me out? Yeah, sure. Can you just email me a list of this, that, and that, which I'll need to take care of it? I'll take care of it whenever I get that from you. Thanks. If that person wanted me to do all of that and doesn't want to go through the trouble of gathering the resources that they have easy access to, that means they don't care about their own thing as much as they care about having me do it for them. So they will leave me alone because I asked them for 5% down of what they wanted 95% of from me. And that is applicable to every ask. However, and I'll get to you in a second because this is important, that is a very useful thing when your goal is to check if you're being treated fairly. That is a survival mechanism and an unconscious bias when you don't know you're doing it all the time. Then it becomes trying to extract a pound of flesh before every exchange. There is no memory of social credit. Everything is COD, cash up front. It's an efficient way to do business and a reliable way to do business, but it's a cold way to do business. And you can only do business with those who are already well off, like yourself, because you won't deal with the dregs of society who have a hard time coming up with any sort of integrity collateral of their own. That's the twisted bias that can happen and the twisted way of thinking that can happen if this is a reactionary state rather than a perceptive tool that can be used in the right situation for the right effect without any lasting social ripple damage, because it is not just the hammer that is used because everything else is a nail. I know it took me a minute to finish that, Tony. You had your hand up. Did I kind of get where you were trying to go?
I was just going to reinforce your point with something else. My friend last week asked me for $25 and tried to sell me on some used car salesman type BS, like even energy exchange, right? I'll do something for you sometime, whatever. And I said, send me 10 job applications first that you filled out and applied for.
Hell yeah.
He got to 4. I consider that a win for me.
Yeah, because he did 4. He did a thing you didn't have to pay out because he didn't keep his word.
And she, I'd like to apologize if she ever watches this, or everybody out there. She is transitioning right now, just started her journey, and she's the host of Transatlantic Conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I actually keep the politics out of it. Not the politics in terms of it's a good or a bad thing, to avoid messy definitions, because often people are politically charged. I tend to go to a genetic definition without morality. And it's not even, it doesn't even transcend to personality. It is strictly a XXXY separation for me with whatever sort of presentation of that XXXY. It's to say it's a yes and rather than a no but. It is a more inclusive definition from my perspective. Yes, it does this, it does that, and this person can do this, that, and the other thing and experience their life the way they are. That's the best you're going to do. I won't rewrite your chromosomes for you in my imagination, because if I had that power and I used it, you would die. I don't want you to die. I want you to have a happy life.
Just want to remind you, we're way off topic.
What's that? Yeah, I know we were way off topic, Tony. I just balanced it out. The restraint bias. The tendency to overestimate one's ability to show restraint in the face of temptation. We all, I can't hold back. I always throw a pie. You try to aim well if you're going to do it. That's my advice. If you're trapped in it, try to pick where you aim. You can make your restraint so ridiculous that it's actually useful. Let me talk about that restraint bias, because I can make that personal and useful. So one of the things I had was an obsessive type of energy. Okay, and it was unfocused. So it would just be this, like, all these tics and things. And you see I move around a lot, but it used to be much more focused. Like I could just go and do the same repetitive task, like Minecraft pixel art or Perler Beats or whatever. And it would be 8 hours, 10 hours of just this mindless, repetition, right? And that was the type of drive, but it was the useless drive. I had no control over it. It wanted me to do that. And so I can't turn that off, couldn't turn it off. But what I could do was refocus the energy and say, if this thing is always going to be on, let me turn it onto something that'll pay dividends. And then I became obsessed with learning how to learn. learning how to understand, learning how to measure. That became my obsession. And the better I got at it, the less I became obsessed, because things started making sense. And then you can relax. So let's talk about the next one. The trait ascription bias, the tendency for people to view themselves as relatively variable in terms of personality, behavior, and mood, when viewing others as much more predictable. Yeah, that's a crapshoot too. I would say on average, it's true. I'm the reasonable person and you're the dickhead. You're the stubborn person. I'm the good person. I'm nice and you're mean. I'm reasonable and you're not. Okay, yeah, every chat on Facebook that doesn't have grown-ups in it, you'll find trait description bias all over the place. So you want to know how to use trait description bias as a mental martial arts marker. There's information there. People do not use a weapon that they think is harmless. Somebody attacks you with words, it's because they think those words will hurt you. Which means the words they attack you with are the words that would hurt them. So from there, what you do with that knowledge depends on the situation and who you're talking with. If you're talking with someone who is trapped in duality, the turn it off again, turn it back on mental diagnostic, that's actually very effective, because if you're not bound by that, all of a sudden you can make bad associations, but to yourself. For example, if you say that I am a person who can do this and would never do that, and you list the things they are doing to you, but you don't blame them for it, they have to choose. Do they do that thing when they know you think it's bad? Or do they leave it alone? And you never call them out on it. That's the magic trick. It's always the target is you, because they're trying to target you. And nobody will say that you can't hit your own target better than they can. So if they're aiming at you, you have to aim at you better. And say, man, I would never make such an assumption about that person, because the last time I did, I was just wrong. And I felt really bad about it. So I'm trying to keep an open mind. And I think that you would do that too, because I don't think you're a bad person. That's how you get around trait description bias. You set an expectation that they aren't currently meeting and let them do the rest, because their weak ego will recognize that you could call them out and you're not. And they will have a choice between bad and worse. Do I look stupid, or do I look like a hypocrite, which also makes me look even stupider? That's the way to use trait description bias. When you recognize it, that is the opportunity for that counter. Listen to what they say hurts you. You're not being real. You're avoiding the issue. You're gaslighting me. That's not relevant. You are being mean. You're being biased. You're being unreasonable. You're being closed-minded. Those are attacks that would hurt them, because they're using them as weapons. And it's different for everybody, which is how you can use cognitive dissonance to measure what a person values very easily, because all you have to do is find out what they don't value. And if they're trapped in duality on that subject, they're telling you what they value when they tell you what they don't. Finally, to wrap this section up, we'll have to cover this next one. Trait ascription bias. No, we did that one. Third person effect. The tendency to believe that mass communicated media effects have a greater effect on others than on themselves. Oh yeah, I watch the news, but I don't believe any of it. You're stupid if you believe that. And I'm not saying that you're making a stupid choice. I'm saying you are literally stupider if you believe that, because the media targets its messages as cognitive dissonance that is unresolved, which creates a low-level anxiety that is unresolved, which lingers, which creates an expectation that needs to be done, but not right now. It has to be carefully watched and monitored, or else it will fall apart, which engages your anxiety systems constantly, which reduces your brain's ability to use its rational thinking centers. And that's been proven. Cognitive dissonance reduces rational thinking. So if you watch the news, which is a thing that is specifically designed to every 8 to 10 seconds, because I've studied it, to ping your cognitive dissonance to maintain a very careful balance of anxiety that is unresolved, just by observing that and having human systems, you are dumber because it knows how to hit the right notes. And you are not immune. That's the restraint bias. That's the third person effect. That's the I'm a special human being effect. That's the that doesn't work on me effect. That's the I'm too smart for that effect. I already told everybody the answer to that. You are always wrong, except when you create a 3-part boundary and only say you're talking about what's inside it, because that is all you could say is true. Everything else is a guess. And you can say it's a guess, but that becomes the limit. And that must be the limit for what you believe is true about what you believe. Here's where I hit the limit. Beyond that, I'm guessing. And that's where the fun is. If you're someone like me, you fuck around and find out. But you got to go anywhere for that to work. So, all right, we're going to end there. We'll pick this up. I guess we're doing one more on bias next time, and I'll be glad to get out of this topic. I'm getting biased against bias and fallacies. That's okay. I'm a trooper. I'm going to power through. And in the editing process, this will be like this high-speed rap thing that'll be quite hypnotic. I'm going to put like beat tracks down and have them just be one after the other. Tony will be in the background doing something. I don't know what. There we go. Were there any questions before I, let y'all go into that gentle night? Going once. Tony's got his hand up.
You've talked about and expressed your health doing these type of sessions. I support you always staying ever cognizant of it.
Say that last part again. I missed like the first 3 words.
I support you being ever cognizant of it.
What is it? The it is what I missed.
It is the energy you're receiving and giving and how it affects you.
Oh,
This is the first time you're doing 2 days in a week, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all I'm saying. I'm saying this is the first time we're doing 2 days in a week. You've talked about it a little bit already. I'm letting you know, I noticed you've talked about it, and that's good. Keep doing that.
Okay. I will. Anyone else? Message received. That's a good one. Duncan, Patricia?
No.
Okay.
I got a good question for you.
Okay, let's hear it.
How many frogs jumped over the elephant when the pond was emptied?
How many what?
How many frogs jumped over the elephant when the pond was empty?
How many?
Well, I don't know. I'm asking you.
Oh, Elif, I know.
One of those bias questions, maybe,
I
which
never
has
heard
nothing
that
to
one.
do with the subject.
Yeah, that was out of left field. I didn't even know what to do with that. Give me a baseball bat. We'll start hitting frogs, I guess.
Yeah, there we go. Then if they don't answer, we'll just, make buttermilk out of them.
We're gonna be like them chocolate frogs from Harry Potter, though, so that way the animal people won't get mad at me.
Can we cook them and eat them?
They're enough to jump, but they're magic. It's okay.
Oh, well, good point.
Go ahead. What, Tony?
Can we cook them and eat them?
I mean, they're chocolate, so you cook them, they'll melt.
Well, that's all right. Melted chocolate's good.
Yeah, we'll make a little fondue. Like, oh, that's a question. If you melt a bunch of magic frogs in a fondue pot, does the magic keep them alive? Like, do they merge into some like ungodly horror?
No,
Like
the
some
magic
genetic
will develop
Cronenberg?
into us. Make us magic.
I don't know. I should write a that sounds like a Justin Rowland Rick and Morty episode, the sentient huddle of
There you go.
chocolate frogs that merged their minds together and became this like living horror. Yeah, see you all next time. Thanks for watching.
Hey, for sure, Tom.
Bye.